Welcome to the SparkCom Podcast, where we talk about trends and what's coming next. This is Manny and
Adam Hartung.
How are you today, Adam?
I'm great, Manny. How are you doing?
Doing very well. This month, the month of December, we are going to be celebrating and talking about innovators. Innovation is obviously something we talk about a lot in trends and businesses, both successful and not successful. And what makes them all happen at the end of the day is the leadership. Those are in charge, those that have the courage and confidence and know how to make things happen. And we felt it was a kind of a cool thing to end the year discussing various innovators. And I know that in my life, I've been inspired by a lot of innovators. I'm sure you have as well, Adam.
Naturally.
And so with that, I want to bring on a special guest today. Her name is Mica, and she is running a company, founded a company called Insulin Now. And I wanted to bring her on board and be able to share with the viewers and listeners a bit about the kind of things that she's doing. Hello there, Mica. How are you doing today?
When I'm not muted, I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing very well. So, Mica, meet Adam.
Hello.
Hello.
So Adam is in Las Vegas, and him and I are happy to have you today on the show. I want you to spend a few minutes here talking about your business and a little bit about why you started it.
So my business is Insulin Now, and it's an online pharmacy devoted to low-cost insulin for diabetics. The way that we got started is that I had a very good friend who was basically just exhausted because she was having to work 3 jobs to pay for her son's insulin, which was more than her mortgage. So I was determined to find a way to help her.
And what are the problems now with the way that insulin is sold? Is there something that is wrong with the process?
There's a lot of people that are involved in the process, and each one of those drives the price up. And so by the time it gets to the consumer, it's just exorbitant.
Can you give me a little bit of history? 40 years ago, a vial of insulin that would last at least a week was $5.
Mm-hmm.
Give us at a high level, what's happened?
So basically, the prices just kept increasing. There's only 3 manufacturers, and they keep tweaking the patents just enough, or the formulas rather, that they won't allow a generic to be developed. They keep the patents rolling. So yeah, there's been 1,000, 2,000% increases, and they've mainly happened in the last 10 years.
So for context, what does is there like an average cost for like a daily dose, if you will, or a weekly dose, or how does it work?
It really depends on the person that is taking it, what they're eating, their stress levels, even what age they are, because hormones can really throw it off too. So there's no average daily dose or anything like that. I can tell you that for people without insurance or people with really high deductibles, they're generally spending between $900 and $1,500 a month for their insulin.
Wow. Okay. So with respect to, on the show, we talk about trends, and we talk about lots of things related to innovation and especially disrupting and creating new markets. Mm-hmm. Are you alone in this cause for making insulin more accessible, or is there other competitors?
There aren't other competitors. There are other advocates, but they're taking more of that advocacy role. So they're going to the government, and they want to allow importation from Canada, and they're going to the manufacturers and trying to get them to the cost down. Well, I've talked to Canada, and Canada doesn't want to be our supplier because they're worried that that they won't be able to supply their patients with the necessary amount. So they're worried about their supplies. And then also the suppliers are North American suppliers. And so they don't want to do anything to undercut their sources. So things that are available in Canada for $30 or $40, it's 300 here. So, so to sell to the United States directly, they actually have non-compete clauses. So, so it's not something that they're really on board with. And then what was the other part of the question? Sorry.
It just had to do with competitors and who's out there now doing that kind of thing.
Yes. So, so there are patient assistance programs and things like that to get the cost down, but there's no one else from a commercial standpoint that is trying to sell insulin for a reasonable cost.
Okay.
And certainly not with the support that we provide as well. We do have an RN that's a diabetes educator. All of our pharmacists are certified in medication therapy management, so they can go through your medications with you and make sure that you are on what you should be on and the dosages that you should be on, because there are times where a higher concentration so that you have to take a smaller dose is a better way to go. So just having that level of support that you won't find at any other pharmacy was really important to us as far as building a community and a place that diabetics can go with all of their questions and knowing that they're getting the best possible care.
Okay. What I'd like to do now is, we talk about 4 major innovation trends in this world right now, disruptive trends. And I think it'd be good for Adam to kind of walk you through those. And then based on that, we're going to do a little bit of introspection and a deeper dive on your business to basically give you some good fertile ground to plow in your mind on how to grow your business. And it's very mindful that you're going through this now. Of course, we're in a pandemic, and the fact that you're an online pharmacy is kind of plays to one of our trends. So Adam, I'll open the door for you.
Yeah, well, certainly one of the 4 big trends is being mobile and being able to operate asynchronously is the second one, both of which you're able to do. One of the things I'm really fascinated by is that often entrepreneurs get really stuck thinking about their product. And in your case, the actual insulin element is something you can't change. So your innovation has to be something other than changing the product itself. I think that's great because people tend to think so narrowly, and now you can't even think that narrowly. And just kind of lay out for us a little bit, how did you innovate a solution that moved beyond the product itself to create these advantages so that you could try to satisfy the need?
There was a few different avenues that we tried initially. We did try to import the insulin ourselves, which we got clearance from the FDA to do, but the state of Arizona Board of Pharmacy wouldn't allow it. So we had to try other avenues, and basically what we hit upon was a Costco wholesale type business model. We recognized that a traditional model wasn't going to work for us and what we were trying to achieve. And so there's an annual fee, and for that, they get access to our experts. They get access to the lowest possible cost for the insulin. Basically, there's not much markup beyond a shipping and handling fee. And also, we just partnered with Harvard Medical for them to provide our all of our educational content. So, well, I'm not supposed to say partnered. We signed a licensing agreement with them. Sorry, they were very specific on that. But they did approach us that they thought that they would be a really good fit for us. And so all of our educational content, all of the tips, there's different courses that our patients can take. They have a 5-week healthy eating plan for type 2 diabetics, just as an example for one of them. And if they complete the courses, they actually get a certificate from Harvard. So just making sure that our resources were second to none, our educational materials were second to none, and just really giving them the best value for their price. So
there's always 2 questions related to customers. One is the cost of acquiring a new customer, and the second is the ability to keep a customer and the cost of keeping customers. In your case, what is it that brings customers to you? How do you get clients initially? What is your approach for getting a new client? And then how do you keep them with you long term?
Right. So we are still a startup, so we are still working on that. But I will tell you that it's all about the relationships. And that's a place that we really strive to be the best, to be the person that they can pick up and call with any sort of a question. And so our best advertising is actually word of mouth, because once we talk to someone and we convey exactly what we're doing and how we're doing it and why we're doing it, it's not even an issue. They tell all of their mom groups, their type 1 groups, it's really been pretty astonishing the amount of word of mouth advertising that we've had done for us. So of course we still have to keep an eye on our ROIs, but customer acquisition costs have been fairly nominal up until now. And as far as keeping them, like I said, it's service that they can't get with any other pharmacy. We are really striving to build that community, that place that they're comfortable asking questions about why are my levels fluctuating, and we can let them know, well, it's hormones, or maybe if it's your child's going through puberty, or whatever it may be, that they can ask those hard to ask questions. And we do our best to help find them answers, including actually my RN is actually calling a patient today because she can't get one of her daughter's constant glucose monitors covered. And so our RN knows exactly how the doctor needs to write the prescription so that insurance will cover it. So really something that no pharmacy would do.
So when you first introduced your company to us, you mentioned that you were driven by the fact that insulin had become extraordinarily expensive and
Correct.
some people unaffordable. But now, as I hear you talk, you haven't really talked about price. So I'm kind of curious, how would you state your value proposition?
Well, our unique value proposition is that we do have a $65 annual fee, but for that, the average insulin user will save $200 to $300 a month on their medication. We are branching out to other medications associated with conditions associated with diabetes, so heart and cardiovascular meds. But basically our unique value proposition is that we do save them that money, and we'll provide the support so that they can go on to live their best life.
We all often talk about entrepreneurs and the amount of effort that's required to get something off the ground.
Yes.
So, having started a business myself and having lots of friends and colleagues and family that have done the same, I realize it's a passion project, right? You're not going to go into this because you could make more money somewhere else initially, right? So right. You mentioned that the drive for you was this, your friend couldn't afford, on 3 jobs, couldn't afford the insulin. Mm-hmm. And so that's sort of a proxy reason. Do you have a personal reason? And where do you want to see this business grow to, we'll say in 5 years? Where do you want to see it?
5 years, I would love to see us dominating the market as far as insulin suppliers for those without insurance. So that's where we would really like to see it. As far as the passion, it just really broke my heart that she never got to see her children because she was trying to keep one of them alive. And I think in our country in this day and age, that's really tragic. So the more research I did, the more I found out that over 40% of them have to make choices between insulin and food. And to have to make that choice for your family to keep one of the members alive, it's just something that no family should have to do. It's interesting because the more people that I can tell my story to, the more people I get put in contact with. And so in talking to one of those manufacturers, the phrase that they kept using was, "That's just the ugly side of pharmacy," when telling me that they couldn't help me get the cost down. So that was one of their favorite phrases. And basically, I think that a lot of people do get hung up on other people's approval and things like that. But as long as you know that what you're doing is needed and necessary and you're solving a problem for people, then you shouldn't have any issue with it. And it's just, I think one of the things that entrepreneurs get hung up on is they fall in love with their company, and this is their baby, and this is how they see it and how they see it going. And when it doesn't go that way, they give up. And so you really have to be flexible about, look, these are my core values, are helping people and taking care of people. And I don't care how I get there. As long as I am taking care of people and helping them, I don't care how I get there. So like I said, I had to change my business model from importation to this other business model. And I'm still looking for ways all the time that I can get the price down further. And so don't be married to one concept, one logo, one business name, or what you think it should look like. You need to be constantly flexible and just always looking for a better way to do things.
I want to go back to where Manny was just a little bit ago, talking about your future. I know that you're focused today on Tucson and you only have a license in Arizona, but really kind of lay it out for me. Have you thought through the steps you're going to take to grow the business over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and what those steps will be like?
So actually, one important step is that the supplier that I'm going to be using has what they call a central fill option that it really took me a lot of digging before I found. And so I had an investor on board initially and it fell through. And so I had to start looking at other options. And so this central fill option came up to where I don't have to have any inventory. So our pharmacist verifies the prescription and then sends it off and they will fill it. Their pharmacist on their end checks it. They pack it with all necessary refrigeration materials and a temperature tracker, and they ship it directly to the patient, which means that I don't have to have $200,000 worth of inventory on hand. And so by really committing to a lean business model and cutting out all unnecessary expenses, it allows us to expand that much faster. And we can also accommodate whatever demand comes up. So it's not that we're going to have growing pains and we can't afford to expand or anything like that. They can accommodate whatever we need and we don't have to purchase more inventory. It stays with them. They don't bill it until they ship it. So that was really important to find that solution. And that also means that we can get pharmacy licenses as quickly as we can. So we can actually, it takes a month or two depending on the states and their requirements, but my pharmacist in charge is already licensed in 11 states, 17 require him to have his license, and he's already licensed in 11 of them. So we've got a great head start there, and I see us being licensed in all 50 states within the next 2 years.
That's great. You know, one of the things that we talk about in the show, especially in light of the kind of stuff you're doing, is following a trend, right? Understanding trends and understanding how your business can be part of one of those trends. A lot of folks, like you mentioned, that have a business want to push against the trend and wonder why their business isn't going anywhere. And certainly you seem to be nimble and smart enough that you're not necessarily settled on this is the only one way to get what you're doing to occur. So I'm going to pose a question to you and I want you to think about it before you answer. So you said that there's 3 major players out in the industry, correct? What is to say that one of those can't flip a switch one day and do what you're doing?
Well, that is a great question. And honestly, if they can sell insulin for a lower cost than I can, go for it. Mission accomplished. It really is all about taking care of the patient. I think that we would still have a community that we've built with the support that they're never going to offer. So, you know, everything from diet to wound care and everything else. Even if we didn't sell any insulin, I think that we would still have the memberships and just be able to take care of our patients. So, but if that's something that the manufacturers are willing to do, I welcome it. Absolutely.
So that in essence solves what you were going after in the first place, is to give the affordable option to those folks that can't afford it.
Absolutely. And then we'll move on to the next set of medications that is exorbitantly priced. So I actually wanted to do heart and cardiovascular meds next, but they'll be part of this business. And we're discussing the possibility of moving on to cancer drugs or EpiPens next. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, that certainly opens up a whole bag of tricks with respect to some of the most recent news on the EpiPen and some of the other drugs. I forget the name of the gentleman that bought that business.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that's really interesting listening to you, Micah, is the contrast with another interviewee that we had a few weeks ago. He was very interested in helping people with low-cost housing. And he really set as his value proposition to make these really, really cheap homes. Now, the problem he had with his business was that, he so focused on the cheap home that he really didn't have anything but that. One of the things I'm going to push you on is I think that you've actually inverted your value proposition. I don't think your value proposition is that you sell low-cost insulin. I think that is part of what you deliver to your customers. I think your value proposition is this holistic approach to the health and well-being of diabetes sufferers, to the point of even putting them into segments such as youth versus people who contract diabetes at old age versus people that get diabetes for other reasons, organ failure, et cetera. And so you really, every time you answer a question, your answer's around the health and well-being of your associates, the people that are in your association. And one of the benefits they get right now is low-cost insulin. I think that's what's really brilliant here, because as you said, if somebody else can give them cheaper insulin, there's still all these other needs that they have, and you're focusing to fill on those. And if you really, I think you should phrase it that way when people ask you what you do. You shouldn't say that you give, that you sell low-cost insulin. I think really what you do is you're after the health and welfare and the care of these diabetes patients, and you're doing something they're not going to get through an association, because that's not what associations do, right? And you're offering them that wellness factor. And so if you start thinking about it that way, it really does open up your mind to these other markets that you talked about, such as oncology and cardiac problems, because that becomes something that all of us can look at and say, oh, wow, yeah, who's looking out for the well-being of me? And often it's not the insurance company. We absolutely know it's not the insurance company, right? And the doctors getting paid by the insurance companies have so many restrictions and things. It's hard sometimes for the doctor to focus as much on the patient, especially if the patient has a dominant disease, right? And so I really think that approach you're taking, that value proposition, is extraordinarily powerful. And be able to say, oh, and by the way, we give you the lowest cost insulin. Because what I'm hearing you say is you'll do that. If Adam Hartung opened up the Adam Hartung insulin shop tomorrow and I could sell for $100 a month cheaper than you'd probably hire me as a supplier, right? And so that's literally, it's just one of the components of what you're offering.
It's actually really interesting that you say that, because I was having a conversation with my registered nurse the other day, and she was really talking about that was how we needed to phrase it when we were talking with doctors, that there was a gap in care. After they leave the doctor's office, they don't call with questions. Their adherence to their medical plan went down. And so really bridging that gap between them and their patients, even to the point of sending them a report after we speak with them, so they'd know what the results of that were. So,
yeah. If you look at innovative companies out there, Uber or Tesla or Facebook or whatever, I would bet that none of those, that the words the cheapest or the lowest cost come out of your mouth, right? It's a different mindset. And so what we're saying here, and I totally agree, is that's another value in what you have to offer. But why do people go to Costco? It isn't necessarily for just a low price. They go there because they get all that they need. They get their wine, they get their meat, they get their, who cares if they get a 50-pound bag of rice? I mean, that's whatever. But at the end of the day, these disruptive innovations are rarely ever out of the gate as the lowest cost provider. And you are providing a service, a solution. And to some degree, when you get a membership at the gym and you're paying $20 a month, you feel more committed to your regimen, or even $100 a month or even more, because you're a member. And I think you have a unique proposition, a unique placement.
I love that perspective. Yeah.
One of the models I think you could aspire towards is this, a place for mom. I'm sure you've seen the ads for that. A very famous television news reporter built this business, to help people deal with their elderly parents. That business was started 20 years ago. Look at how the world has changed in 20 years. People are living a lot longer. People are living longer with diseases. It's a very different world. Yet that need has persisted.
Mhm.
What do we do? How do we take care of mom? And so her business has persisted. And I think that's one of the things you're sitting on top of is that diabetes, gosh, we wish for a miracle cure and we keep hoping for transplants and things that will come along. But in the meantime, diabetes care revolves around oftentimes insulin and other supporting drugs.
Mhm.
And that you could focus on how do we help those people with this illness, how to get by with this illness, how to manage the illness, which is,
Mhm.
as you said, a daily issue, given that your
Right.
exercise and your food intake and things change on a daily basis.
Mhm.
And that illness as it interacts with other illnesses, especially in seniors. So I think that's where we could see that if somebody came along and they said, well, you're just sitting on one issue, cheap insulin, it's like, oh, no, I'm sorry. There's so much more to it than that.
Right.
So much more. And that's why I would say that they would be very short-term oriented, whereas the approach you're taking is very long-term oriented. And just like a place for mom's been around for 20 plus years, I see how there could be a place for this kind of support in diabetes and then perhaps, as you said, in other illnesses longer term.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Well, we like to be helpful as well as critical on this show.
Well, I mean, being critical and part of being an entrepreneur, and you can attest to this because you've already mentioned it, is you're going to have the naysayers.
Yeah.
And the way you take the naysayers really helps to define the trajectory at which you're going to grow your business.
Mhm.
And so there's this interesting balance that occurs. And I've seen it because I've been on the receiving end. When somebody tells you no, you do two things if you're smart about it. You respectfully say thank you for that information and you absorb it, right? And you see if there's any truth to what they're saying.
Mhm.
And then the flip side of it is you use that as almost like energy to propel you forward.
Right.
And so that's the smart thing. And I think that what you're doing is very commendable, and you're not running up against any significant we'll call it trend challenges,
Mhm.
in that everything's laying out in your favor. You've got a pandemic here that is keeping people at home. They don't want to go to the pharmacy. They can get something delivered. If we're talking about the particular value of the lowest cost insulin, you get people on the mobility side and on the intelligence side and gravitating towards wanting more information from these beautiful little objects here,
Right.
of a phone, of a smartphone.
Mhm.
And I think if you play your cards right, you can create a good business model where you offer some free content,
Mhm.
and then you offer some paid content of the
Mhm.
membership, of
Right.
which one of those is low cost insulin.
Mhm.
We'll go back to those four big trends that we say are driving the world economy for the next decade. Mobile is one of them. You're certainly sitting on top of that. Being asynchronous is a big one. I like how your business model allows you to interact with the patient asynchronously and interact with the physician, interact with the pharmacist, interact with the nurse, interact with the family. These are all asynchronous touch points, which fits the way we live and work in our lives. The third one is the gig economy. You're going to help people that are in the gig economy that perhaps don't have insurance, or
Mhm.
don't have coverage or sufficient coverage for this in their lives. So you're helping the gig economy to grow by offering a support service to them, and you probably can utilize gig workers, gig pharmacists in your business model. The fourth one that I think is going to really help you down the road, and you probably already started there, is artificial intelligence. Because
Mhm.
what I'm saying, I listen to you and I can hear you telling me, well, this is step one of the diabetes journey, step two, step three. People come into it at different points, but they've got all these different touch points that they have to deal with over time. That knowledge is now something you put that into an AI engine that will help people on your website, help people when they're talking to you, help with communication to where it gets them faster to the answers. And then you're going to be like unstoppable because you'll be out ahead of anybody with sort of artificial intelligence about what these people with this disease need. And that would just give you a lead that I don't think anybody would ever catch.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So thank you. Yes, I'll definitely be checking into that. It's interesting that you talked about being on trend and things like that. Actually, right before the whole pandemic started, I was actually asked to come in and speak at the U of A College of Medicine because they were really pushing alternative business models with the soon to be doctors. So that's really interesting that they were already starting to look at that as a trend, and telemedicine has grown, I think, approximately 3,000% since the pandemic started. And diabetics are immunocompromised anyway, so they really shouldn't be out. So
Yeah, as a very wise man once told me, these major market shifts, these major crises like the pandemic,
Mhm.
like these whole global things, only accelerate what was already there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that wise guy was Adam on the line here. But in the end, that's what happens, right? You're in the middle of this, you're before the pandemic, things are moving at a certain pace. People are wondering why they're going to the office. Kids are wondering why they can't take classes at home. And movie theaters are getting less folks attending them, and all that, is in process. Boom, the punctuated equilibrium event happens, and all of a sudden here we are 9 months later, and the world's a massively different place, and we're not going back.
No.
All right. So with that, any final thoughts, Adam, before we sign off with Mica? I'll let Mica have the last word. But
I just want to also say that, Mike, I think you're on the right direction with where the regulations are going. 8 years ago, I was talking to some experts. They were saying how there was a code in the insurance for an office visit. There was a code for a phone call. There was no code for telemedicine. Mm-hmm. So doctors wouldn't undertake a telemedicine visit. Right. We had to change that quickly because of the COVID-19 experience. But what it's doing is it's pushing people in this direction, staying on these trends, and your kind of service just fits exactly on where those trends sit. Get into that database, build that database, and just get smarter than everyone else, and you'll be on, nobody will catch you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Any final words, Mica, before I wrap up?
Thank you for all of the insight and the perspective changes, and I just thank you very much. I'm grateful.
You're very welcome. And obviously, we've known each other for a little while. And, one of the things we talk about here is following trends and aligning yourself and really thinking like an innovator. And I'll put in a shameless plug for our course that will be released next week.
Absolutely.
On thinking like an innovator. It really helps to wrap all these things around your business and understand how you can take it to the next level. So thank you so much for your time, Mica.
Thank you.
Adam, we'll talk to you later.
Thank you.